In this video, I'm going to show you how I make these model trees using Woodland Scenics armatures and clump foliage. The second part of this video is going to be building a modular forest base that allows for the removal of the trees. These armatures are a great starting point for building model trees. There's just a few steps that need to be followed to get them looking realistic. I first start off by trimming off all the excess plastic. Just like other models, there's going to be some cleaning up that needs to be done. These armatures come packaged completely flat, so the next step is to bend all the branches so that they're horizontal. This is quite easy to do by hand, and no additional tools are required. This is a bit of a process and requires a bit of back and forth to make sure you have a realistic looking tree. Even with the branches turned horizontal, you'll notice that the tree still doesn't look quite real. All the branches are currently only on the left and right. This next step can be made much easier with a couple of pliers, since the main trunk doesn't twist as easy. If you're attempting to do this by hand, I suggest dunking these into hot water first. I'm holding the bottom portion of the tree steady with one plier, and using the other plier to twist the upper portion. This technique can be continued all the way up to the tree until you're done. As you can see, the armature is looking much more realistic now. The branches are evenly spaced all around the trunk. For this next step, I like to use hobby tack. When the stuff dries, it becomes extremely sticky and holds the foliage quite well. I'm only applying the glue to the tips of the branches. This will create a much more realistic looking tree in the end. I'm also making sure to cover the underside of the branches as well. When this glue dries, it goes completely clear and becomes very sticky. So this next step is speeded up quite a bit since I wanted to show the full process of applying clump foliage. The first part is all about getting on as much as possible. Afterwards, there's a lot of adding and removing until the tree starts to look real. Spending time during this part will give you the best results. You'll also notice that I'm shaking the tree to get rid of any loose bits. I want to make sure only the foliage that's adhered to the hobby tack is remaining. This will prevent any loose foliage falling out over time. And here's the finished tree, ready to be planted. Now it's time to create a modular base for these trees. I start off by making an organic shape. My preference for material is XPS foam, cut down in width with a hot wire table. If you're following along and don't have a hot wire cutter, I suggest using a thinner material such as chipboard. The goal is to have two thin pieces of material that are identical. Before any further gluing or cutting is done, I'm placing all the trees down to get an idea of positioning. Next, I'm going to be drawing circles around each tree. These are eventually going to turn into the individual bases of the trees. The next step is to cut the individual bases out. It's important to keep both the larger shape and the smaller shapes intact. It's okay to cut through the larger shape to reach the smaller ones, since all the gaps will be filled later on. I'm then going to glue the larger shape with the cutouts to the matching shape with no cutouts. I'm not applying any glue to the smaller shapes here. This will form the base of our modular forest. To glue the trees down, I'm using a hot glue gun. The fast drying nature of hot glue allows for instant adhesion between the tree and the base. So this next step will result in a cleaner end piece. I'm going to be filling all the gaps with spackle. This will cover up the gaps between the two larger base pieces and the cuts that were needed to get to the smaller shapes. Next, I'm going to be covering the entire top side of the forest using watered down wood glue. I avoid gluing the areas where the trees sit since I don't want anything additional in these gaps, besides the tree bases. After the glue is dried, I start applying an even coat of sand. Midway through, I start moving around the sand by hand to ensure it's evenly distributed before it dries. Time for paint. I'm going to be using the color Nutmeg by Apple Barrel. It looks quite orange here under this light, but you'll see afterwards that it's much more brown. I give the entire forest a nice even coat. This includes the rim of the forest, which I kept void of any texturing since I want to stylistically keep this clean. Here you can see a better representation of this color. After painting, the small bases fit a bit too tight in the forest base, so I decided to give them a bit of a sanding. This allows for them to be placed much easier. Next, I'm going to give all the bases a quick gray dry brush. This will make the earth look much more interesting and give it variation. The next step is to apply more watered down wood glue. This time, I'm making sure to brush this on in a splotchy pattern. This glue is going to be for the flock, and I want some parts of earth showing through. For the flock, I'm using Woodland Scenics blended turf. I give the entire base a light coating and afterwards shake off the excess. I recommend placing a clean surface underneath to catch any excess flock. So the sanding took off a bit of paint on the tree bases, so I'm giving them a quick touch up. And here's the finished modular forest. Whether it's to make room for a bunch of models within the forest, or to use the trees elsewhere, having the trees on their own bases provides a bunch of flexibility. Here you can see them being used with the hills that were made in the last video. And that's it for this video. Hope you enjoyed it. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed that video, make sure to let me know in the comments below, and also don't forget to like and subscribe. I'll see you guys next time.